Let me speak straight to the soul that's wrestling with regret. You missed the opportunity. The timing wasn't right. The door closed and you stood in the hallway wondering what could have been. You look back with if only echoing in your mind like a broken record. You thought it was the moment, the one you prayed for, waited on, dreamed about. You were ready, or at least you thought you were. But the opportunity passed. The door shut. The call didn't come. The timing slipped through your fingers, and now you're left staring at the wreckage of what could have been. Disappointment settles in, whispering that you've missed it, that you failed, that your chance came and went. But here's the truth. What feels like the end is often the beginning of something far greater. God doesn't waste missed chances. What looks like a loss in your eyes can be the very soil where He begins planting something deeper, something stronger. That opportunity you missed, it might have been a setup, not for failure, but for formation. Because before God elevates you, He prepares you. And sometimes that preparation doesn't look like success. Sometimes it looks like waiting, like obscurity, like being passed over, like closed doors that make you question everything you thought you knew. But God doesn't panic when your plan falls apart. He isn't pacing heaven wondering why the timing didn't work out. He's not surprised by the delay. He's not thrown off by the detour. In fact, He might have written it in because what you call a missed opportunity, He might be calling a master plan. Just look at Scripture. Joseph had a dream as a teenager. But before he stepped into the palace, he was thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, and locked in prison. At any point, he could have said, I missed it. But every moment of rejection, every closed door, every delay was a setup. God was shaping him for the weight of the promise. If he had walked into Pharaoh's court too early, he wouldn't have lasted. God wasn't just preparing the palace for Joseph, He was preparing Joseph for the palace. You think it's over because your plan didn't unfold the way you expected? But maybe the real opportunity wasn't the one you missed. Maybe it's the one being built right now in the unseen. God is not limited by your timeline. He's not bound by your calendar. He's eternal, which means He sees the end from the beginning. And if He allowed something to pass, it's because there's something greater in motion. You were never meant to live in regret. That missed chance, don't bury your hope in it. Don't chain your identity to it. What God is preparing for you won't look like what you lost. It'll be better because He's not just trying to give you a moment. He's building you for longevity, for purpose, for impact. You didn't miss your life. You're in the middle of His plan. What felt like the end might be the exact place He starts the next chapter. This isn't punishment. It's positioning. You didn't fall off course. You're being set up for something greater than you imagined. Waiting is hard, especially when you've been praying, believing, preparing, and still nothing. No movement, no breakthrough, just silence. You look around and see others stepping into their moments, walking through doors, living in answered prayers, while you're still stuck in the hallway wondering if God forgot you. But the truth is, delay does not mean denial. Just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it won't. God's timing is not your timing. He doesn't work according to your calendar. He's not pressured by clocks or deadlines. He's not late. He's intentional. And sometimes what feels like a delay is actually His mercy. Sometimes He slows things down to grow you before He gives you what you've been asking for. Because God doesn't just prepare the blessing for you. He prepares you for the blessing. You think waiting is a sign of rejection, but it might be a sign of protection. There are doors you prayed would open that He didn't unlock, not because you're unworthy, but because He loves you too much to let you walk into something before you're ready to handle it. A gift given too early can become a burden. Success without maturity can destroy a person. God is more committed to your becoming than to your arriving. The delay doesn't mean the promise is canceled. It means it's under construction. There are things happening that you can't see, conversations being had, battles being fought, shifts being made. And while you're sitting in the tension of not yet, God is building something in the unseen that will be worth every second you waited. The silence is not abandonment. It's often strategy. He's working in the background while your faith is being refined in the foreground. Consider Abraham. God gave him a promise that he'd be the father of nations. But decades went by before Isaac was born. It would have been easy to give up, to settle, to believe the delay meant denial. But God didn't forget. The promise had a time, and when that time came, nothing could stop it. Not age, not circumstance, not even Abraham's own doubts. Sometimes the space between the promise and the fulfillment is where the most important work happens. That's where you develop perseverance. That's where your trust gets rooted. That's where your identity stops being tied to outcomes and starts being anchored in who God is. If everything came instantly, you'd miss the depth, the weight, the substance. You don't have to fear the weight. What God said, He will do. What He promised, He will complete. Don't confuse delay with denial. They are not the same. One is about timing, the other is about trust. And if you can hold on in the delay, if you can worship in the waiting, you'll find that the promise hasn't gone anywhere. It's just waiting for the moment God knows is right. There are moments in life when it feels like something has slipped through your hands forever. The job you didn't get, the relationship that fell apart, the time you can't get back, the opportunities that seem to vanish, all of it can leave you feeling like the best parts of your story are behind you. Regret creeps in and you begin to wonder if what was lost will ever be found again. But God is not a God of permanent loss. He is the God who restores what you thought was gone for good. Restoration doesn't mean going back to the way things were. It means God brings something back to life, but stronger, deeper, more whole. What He restores, He refines. What He returns, He resurrects. Even if it looks different than before, it carries a new weight, a new beauty, a new strength, because it passed through the fire of loss and came out touched by grace. God doesn't panic over what you think is over. He's not intimidated by your past, your failures, or your mistakes. In fact, some of the most powerful moves of God begin in places where things fell apart. He's not just able to restore, He loves to restore. He takes what's broken and makes it whole. He takes what's dead and breathes life into it again. It's not just about giving you back what you lost. It's about giving you back more than you had before. In the book of Joel, God speaks to His people who had experienced devastation. Their crops had been destroyed by locusts. Years of harvest were wiped out. But God didn't say, move on. He said, I will restore to you the years that the locusts have eaten. Not just the crops, the years. Because God sees what you lost in time, in energy, in heartache. And He knows how to bring fullness back into places that were emptied. Your story is not beyond repair. That season you thought was wasted, God can use it. That opportunity you believe you'll never get again, He can open a better one. That relationship you thought was permanently damaged, He knows how to heal hearts and redeem connections. Nothing is too far gone for the hands of the Redeemer. Sometimes what looks like loss is really pruning. God allows some things to be cut back so that better fruit can grow. It feels painful in the moment, but the restoration that comes after is richer than what you had before. And in the process, He doesn't just restore circumstances, He restores you, your confidence, your purpose, your hope. God is not finished with what you thought was over. He is still working in the silence, still writing in the background. And when He restores, it won't be a cheap copy of the past. It will be something new, something healed, something holy. You didn't lose everything. God is still holding what you thought was gone, ready to return it in a way only He can. There's a lie that creeps in after you fall, fail, or drift too far. The lie that says, you're done. You made too many mistakes. You missed too many chances. You should have known better, tried harder, or been stronger. And now you feel like you've been disqualified from the plan God had for your life. But the truth is, God does not revoke His calling because of your weakness. His grace doesn't have fine print. You're not disqualified. God never called you based on perfection. He called you in full view of your brokenness. He saw the chapters you haven't lived yet, the detours, the disasters, the moments where you'd want to give up on yourself, and still He said, I choose you. His plans aren't erased by your failures. In fact, He often works through them. The world says, disqualify the fallen. But God says, I'll raise them, redeem them, and use them. David committed adultery and murder, and still he was called a man after God's heart. Peter denied Jesus 3 times at his darkest hour, and still Jesus restored him and used him to lead the early church. Paul persecuted Christians, And still, he became the author of much of the New Testament. God doesn't pick perfect people, he picks willing ones, and he doesn't give up on his own. When you mess up, shame tries to take over. It whispers, "You're no longer useful, you've gone too far." But shame is a liar. God doesn't look at your story and see a discarded plan. He sees potential, purpose, and a reason to pour even more grace. He knows how to bring beauty from ashes, not in spite of your failures, but sometimes because of them. Your scars can become the platform for his glory. You can't out-sin his grace. You can't fall so far that he can't reach. The enemy wants you stuck in guilt so you won't move forward. But God is calling you to get up, to stand in the truth that you are still called, still chosen, still equipped. His gifts and callings are irrevocable. You are not broken beyond use. You are exactly the kind of person he loves to restore. And this isn't about pretending the past didn't happen. It's about letting God redeem it. Every wrong turn, every mistake, every moment you wish you could undo, he can use it all. Nothing is wasted in his hands. What disqualified you in people's eyes doesn't disqualify you in his. You don't have to carry the weight of who you were. You belong to the one who makes all things new. So shake off the lie. You're not disqualified. You're not too late. You're not too broken. God's not done with you. If you're still breathing, you're still in the story. And his story is always one of redemption, restoration, and relentless grace. Closed doors can be painful. You prepare, you pray, you believe, and then nothing. The job falls through, the relationship ends, the opportunity vanishes. And in the silence that follows, it's easy to assume you've done something wrong. You wonder if God is punishing you, if you missed a step, if you're somehow to blame. But not every no is rejection. Not every closed door is punishment. Sometimes it's protection. God sees what you can't. He knows what's ahead. The conversations behind the scenes, the intentions of people you haven't met yet, the consequences of choices you were about to make. When he closes a door, it's not always about withholding something from you. Often it's about saving you from something you weren't meant to carry. You were asking for an open door, but he was giving you a shield. You may have begged God to make something work, only to watch it fall apart. But what if that unanswered prayer was the kindest thing he could have done for you? What if the relationship that didn't last was saving you from heartbreak 10 times worse? What if the job that didn't come through was keeping you from a toxic environment? We don't always see the danger. We don't know what's on the other side, but he does. And he doesn't close doors to hurt you. He closes them to guide you. It's hard to see this in real time. Disappointment has a way of clouding perspective. You don't always get a reason. Sometimes all you get is a closed door and a quiet trust that God knows what he's doing. And that's where faith grows. Not in the open doors, but in the locked ones. Not in the clear paths, but in the detours. That's where your trust is tested. That's where you learn that God's no is still filled with love. Scripture is full of moments where God redirected people by closing doors. In Acts 16, Paul and his companions were trying to preach in Asia, but the Spirit of Jesus didn't allow them. It wasn't because they were wrong, it was because God had a better plan. That no led them to Macedonia, where entire households came to faith. The closed door was protection and redirection. Sometimes you'll only understand the closed door in hindsight. You'll look back and realize what God kept you from, what he redirected you toward, and how that no led to a better yes. But even when you don't get the clarity, you can still trust his character. God isn't cruel. He doesn't toy with your heart. He knows exactly what you need and exactly what you don't. So if a door closes, don't assume the worst. Don't spiral into shame. Pause and ask, what might God be protecting me from? And then trust that if it was right, he wouldn't have closed it. The door didn't shut to punish you. It shut to lead you towards something better, something safer, something divine. Life rarely follows a straight line. You set out with a vision, a plan, maybe even a word from God, and then something happens. You make a mistake. You take a wrong turn. Life hits you with something you didn't see coming. Now you're standing somewhere you never thought you'd be, wondering if you've gone too far off track to ever get back to where you were supposed to be. But here's what you need to know. God's plan can handle your detours. You don't have the power to derail a destiny that was written by an all-knowing, all-powerful God. He factored in your wrong turns before you ever made them. He saw the heartbreak, the delay, the distraction, and he didn't throw away the plan. He adjusted the route. His purpose isn't fragile. It doesn't shatter when you stumble. It bends without breaking, because God doesn't build plans that can't survive real life. Even when you wander, God walks with you. Look at the Israelites in the wilderness. They took what should have been an 11-day journey and turned it into 40 years of wandering. But God never abandoned them. He provided manna in the morning, water from rocks, and guidance by cloud and fire. Even in their detour, he was working. Even in their delay, his promise stood. The land was still waiting for them. Jonah ran in the opposite direction of his calling, and God didn't cancel the assignment. He sent a storm to bring him back. Peter denied Jesus, not once, not twice, but 3 times. And Jesus still called him to lead the early church. The detour didn't disqualify them. It deepened their understanding of grace. It reminded them that God's faithfulness isn't based on performance. It's rooted in his nature. Your detour might look like failure. It might feel like shame. But in God's hands, it becomes a classroom, a shaping ground, a deeper well of wisdom, compassion, and strength. He doesn't just work despite your detours. He works through them. What you thought was a delay may actually be preparation. What looked like a step backward may be the setup for your next leap forward. You don't need to live in fear that you've missed it. You're not too late. You're not too far gone. The same God who called you at the beginning is still calling you now. And he knows how to get you from where you are to where you're meant to be. It might not look like the route you imagined, but it will still lead to the promise. God isn't pacing in heaven, anxious about your choices. He's not caught off guard. He's already made a way forward. Even now, he's redeeming the lost time, restoring what was broken, and realigning your steps. The detour doesn't cancel the plan. It reveals the depth of the one who made it. He's not finished. He's just getting started right where you are. Regret is heavy. It doesn't just visit. It settles in. It replays the moment you wish you could undo, the words you wish you hadn't said, the choices you'd take back in a heartbeat. And when regret takes hold, it doesn't just weigh on your mind. It starts to define you. You begin to think, this is who I am now. I messed up. I missed it. I ruined it. But here's the truth. Grace is greater than regret. And when regret pushes you down, grace reaches lower to lift you back up. God never intended for you to live buried under the weight of your past. That's why grace exists. Grace isn't soft. It's not passive. It's powerful. It moves into the middle of your lowest moment and refuses to let shame have the final word. Regret says, you blew it. Grace says, I've covered it. Regret says, you're disqualified. Grace says, you're still called. Regret chains you to who you were. Grace reminds you of who you are and who you're becoming. There's a reason the enemy loves regret. Because it keeps you stuck. Not because God won't forgive you, but because you won't forgive yourself. But that's not how grace works. Grace doesn't just pardon your sin, it reclaims your story. It takes the chapter you wish you could erase and rewrites it into something redemptive, something useful, something holy. God doesn't ignore your past, he transforms it. Look at Peter. He walked with Jesus, loved him, believed in him, and then denied him when it mattered most. 3 times. That moment could have defined him. It could have been the end of his story. But Jesus didn't meet Peter with condemnation. He met him with restoration. Do you love me? He asked. Not, why did you fail me? Not, what were you thinking? Just an invitation to come back, to be healed, to keep walking in purpose. Grace is not afraid of your worst moment. It's not surprised by your regret. And it's not asking you to fix it before you're worthy of forgiveness. Grace meets you in the mess. It doesn't avoid your shame. And it steps right into it and says, this doesn't get to define you anymore. Grace picks you up off the floor and stands you on your feet, not because you earned it, but because love chose to. You are not your mistake. You are not the thing you wish you hadn't done. Regret might still whisper, but it's not in charge. Grace speaks louder. Grace carries more authority. And when you let it in, it doesn't just lighten the load, it changes everything. It gives you the courage to try again, to forgive yourself, and to move forward with hope. God isn't holding your past against you. His grace is already ahead of you, making a way. Regret may weigh heavy, but grace always lifts higher. There are moments when everything feels like it's falling apart. The job ends, the relationship breaks, the dream dissolves. The door you prayed would open slams shut. And in the middle of it all, the silence is deafening. You look around at the ruins of what once was, and the only conclusion you can draw is, this must be the end. But what if it's not? What if the ending you're grieving is actually the beginning God is preparing? God doesn't always announce new beginnings with fireworks and celebration. Sometimes He wraps them in endings that feel like loss. He allows certain things to close so that something greater can open. But because we're so tied to what we know, we resist the shift. We try to revive what God is trying to release. We cling to the past because we don't yet see the promise in the future. But just because it looks like the end doesn't mean it is. When Jesus was crucified, His followers were devastated. They had believed He was the Messiah. They had given up everything to follow Him, and now He was buried behind a stone. It didn't just look like the end, it was the end in their eyes. But heaven was orchestrating a resurrection. God wasn't finished, He was just getting started. Sometimes the ground has to break before the seed can grow. Sometimes what looks like death is actually the beginning of new life. You might be looking at the shattered pieces of what used to be, but God sees the foundation of what's to come. He's not afraid of endings because He holds time in His hands. And when He closes one chapter, He already knows how the next one will begin. We often want the new thing without letting go of the old. But God doesn't work through comfort zones. He works through surrender. And surrender often feels like loss until you see what He brings from it. Abraham had to leave everything familiar before he could step into the promise. Joseph had to go through betrayal and prison before he could step into purpose. Ruth had to walk away from her past before she could find her future. So if it looks like everything is ending, don't panic. Take a breath. God is still at work. What you see as a full stop might just be a comma in His story. He's not done with you. He's not confused about where you are, and He hasn't forgotten the promise He made. The ending is not a punishment. It's an invitation to trust Him in the unknown, an invitation to step into something you haven't seen yet, an invitation to believe that the best isn't behind you, it's still ahead. Because in the kingdom of God, endings aren't final. They're just the soil where new beginnings take root. Throughout life, moments of missed chances, delays, closed doors, detours, regrets, and endings can feel overwhelming and discouraging. But the truth remains, God's plan is bigger than our mistakes, longer than our waiting, and wiser than our understanding. He restores what seems lost, protects us through closed doors, and carries us through detours with unfailing grace. When regret weighs us down, His grace lifts us up. And what looks like an end is often the fertile ground for a new beginning. No matter where you find yourself today, remember this, it's not over. God is still working, still loving, still moving, and your story is far from finished. Trust Him to bring the breakthrough in His perfect timing, because with God, missed chances are just the start of something greater.